Hi guys, how we doing? It's Amy here bringing you this week's last Life Words video looking at the end of Joseph's story. What a week it's been as we have journeyed with Joseph through the jealousy and hatred that had divided his family, sold into slavery, taken to Egypt when it looked like it couldn't get worse, then thrown into jail accused of a crime he hadn't committed. Then in jail we saw how his gift to interpret dreams had led him from a place of being in prison to becoming the Prime Minister of Egypt. But there's still part of the story left unfinished. Joseph and his family, well, there needs to be some sort of ending there. And so today we are picking the story up in chapter 42, looking at what life has been like for Joseph's family. Because while Joseph was thrown into prison and then excelled and became the Prime Minister, times have been tough back in the land of Canaan. Jacob and Joseph's brothers have been hit hard by the famine. Jacob is still grieving many years later the death of Joseph. The brothers still carry their guilt for what their jealousy and hatred led them to do. And they're starving because there's no grain, there's no food. But they hear that over in Egypt there is food going spare. And so, beginning in chapter 42 through to 44, we see the brothers journey backwards and forwards to Egypt. First of all, the brothers go to beg for food. Joseph recognizes them instantly, but doesn't let on who he is. Instead, he wants to test his brothers. What have the last years taught them? Are they honest men? Joseph, on the first time, accuses them of being spies, sends them back to Canaan with some food, but without one of the brothers, Simeon, who is to stay behind in order that the brothers bring back their youngest brother, Benjamin, to prove that they are honest men. They aren't lying about their intentions in Canaan. The brothers go back to Canaan without Simeon. Jacob is devastated. He now feels they've lost another brother, another son. Anyway, they go hungry again. They have to come back to Egypt. This time they bring with them the youngest brother. But a game continues because when they leave, Joseph has one of his servants hide something in Benjamin's sack. This then goes out through the palace, I guess, that this has happened, and the men are stopped on their journey home and brought back to Egypt. The brothers are horrified to have been accused of stealing, and a search happens. And where is the missing cup? It's in Benjamin's bag. That's a problem though, because the brothers had said, if we've stolen anything, let anyone who is the thief be kept behind. But it's Benjamin, Jacob's new favourite. So what happens? Well, another of the brothers, Judah, asks to stay in his place. He asks to be the one who stays in imprisonment. Please don't do this to our father Jacob. He loves Benjamin more. Please let him return. Now Joseph is moved by compassion. At one point we're told that he has to leave the room because he's so overwhelmed with the emotions. His crying can be heard throughout the house. But what happens instead of anger? He chooses to reveal himself. Brothers, it's me, Joseph. The one you intended to do harm to, the Lord has used it for good. Here I am. You sold me into slavery. I ended up in prison, but look where God has brought me to. Now the Prime Minister of Egypt, saving lives. Joseph had a lot to be angry about. The brothers had done him wrong, but he had trusted that even in the wrong, God was working his purposes out. There's a moment of reconciliation, of forgiveness. Joseph sends his brothers back to Canaan to bring his father, and there's this beautiful reunion of the family, a coming together. The family no longer settle in Canaan, but come to live just outside of Egypt. There's movement forward. There's a lot probably to be talked about and discussed. The family have lived in misery for years, carrying a heavy guilt, carrying the burden of grief. But God has used his purposes. The story didn't end in deception and jealousy. There's so much for us that we can learn through this story, and Kwaku and I will be unpacking it on Friday at 4 p.m. on our Instagram. But here's a couple of thoughts. God calls us to be people that trust him, that even amidst huge suffering and difficult situations, God can still use our suffering for good. He doesn't make us suffer, but he can still redeem the bad things in our life to be part of our testimony, to use these experiences to grow us, that we might learn things going forward. God calls us to be people who forgive. Forgiveness and reconciliation can be difficult. Perhaps there's people we know we need to ask forgiveness of. Perhaps there's people we know we need to forgive. Now, we might not feel ready to do that yet, but how might we pray today that God might work in our hearts to make reconciliation and forgiveness possible? That we might not hold on to the wrongs of the past, but might learn to look forward, to embrace the present, and to see the future through a lens of opportunity. Where do we need to know God's whispering in our lives today? Who do we need to forgive? Who do we need to ask forgiveness of? Where are we still waiting to see how God might use some of our struggles and challenges to build us, to mature us, and to use these things so that the tests in our life may become part of our testimonies that point more people to God at work in us and how Jesus might change their lives too. What have you learned this week from our study in the story of Joseph? Maybe drop it in the comments, maybe ask your questions, and we look forward to discussing this story more with you on Friday on Instagram. Guys, have a blessed rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.